"Help me, human, my parents were slain today. Can I stay here?" "Hide, they're coming." Elias had always liked the quiet of the frontier settlement. The small cluster of buildings sat at the edge of the system, far from the bustling trade routes and the eyes of the galactic powers that ruled most stars. Most people thought of humans as weak, insignificant, and slow to adapt. They were wrong, but Elias had grown used to it. Life was simple here: machines, repairs, and occasional deliveries from traders who came every few weeks. Nothing remarkable ever happened. That was why the knock at his door startled him so much. It was late at night. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting long, silver shadows across the settlement. Elias wiped the grease from his hands, unsure if he had heard the sound correctly. Another knock, louder this time, echoed through the quiet night. He wiped his hands on his apron and cautiously walked to the door. Outside, in the dim light, he saw a small figure. The shape was alien, fragile, and trembling. Elias instinctively reached for a sidearm, but something in the figure's posture stopped him. The figure raised its head, and Elias realized it was a child. Its eyes were wide with fear, and its skin, pale and almost translucent, shimmered faintly under the moons. "Help, please, human," the child whispered, voice breaking. Its words were halting, broken by a translator implant that struggled to convert the alien tongue. "My parents, they are gone, killed. Can I stay?" Elias' heart clenched. The child's small hands were covered in smudges of something dark. He could not tell if it was blood, ash, or something else entirely, but it did not matter. In that moment, the human in him overrode every rule of caution and fear. "Come inside," he said, opening the door fully. The child stumbled in, coughing, trying to keep its small body upright. Elias closed the door and bolted it, pressing his back against it as he quickly checked the locks. Outside, he could already hear a distant hum, ships descending, sensors activating, and the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the settlement. The child collapsed onto the floor, gasping. Elias knelt beside it, gently lifting its head. Its eyes met his, full of terror and confusion. "They're coming," it said, whispering. Hide, or they will take you too." Elias' mind raced. He had known humans were often underestimated by other species, but even he had not expected a situation like this. From the child's fragmented words, he understood that the alien hunters who had killed the child's parents were not just violent. They were organized, skilled, and relentless. He guided the child toward a hidden storage room under the workshop, a place he had designed long ago for emergencies. It was small, cramped, and dark, but it would have to do. "Stay here. Don't make a sound," Elias instructed, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. He handed the child a blanket and a small ration pack. The child hugged the blanket tightly, shivering, eyes darting to every shadow as if expecting them to come through the walls. Elias moved back to the main floor. He opened a hidden panel behind his workbench and activated the settlement's emergency systems. It had been years since anyone had considered using them. Humans had always been thought weak, but they had a habit of preparing for the impossible. Lights flickered, sensors hummed, and automated doors sealed sections of the settlement. The outer perimeter lights simulated activity, showing multiple human figures moving about, even though the only humans awake were Elias and the child. The first hunters arrived quietly, stepping from their landers with disciplined precision. They were not large, but they were fast, their movements coordinated and lethal. They scanned the streets, expecting no resistance. They expected empty buildings. They expected easy prey. Elias watched them through a small viewport. His hands hovered over his tools. He did not have a gun ready. He had never needed one for himself, but he had something just as deadly in his mind. Humans' ability to adapt and use everything around them as a weapon. The hunters moved through the settlement, methodically checking each building. Elias' house would have been the next target. He activated the workshop's automated distractions. Holographic images of people running appeared in the streets. Lights switched on and off in patterns that suggested movement, and heat emitters mimicked human bodies. The hunters paused, confused by the sudden signals. They communicated with clicks and tones that the translator in Elias' ears struggled to interpret. They were not used to resistance. They were not used to unpredictability. They assumed humans were simple, passive creatures. The child, hidden in the storage room, watched Elias. Its eyes were wide, filled with both fear and awe. It had never seen humans like this, not fighting, not resisting, not clever. It had only known its parents, brilliant scientists who had tried to warn the galaxy of the coming danger, only to be silenced. The child realized that these humans were different. They were more than survival instincts. They were stubborn, relentless, and fearless. Hours passed. The hunters moved slowly, becoming increasingly frustrated. They split into teams, searching more aggressively. Elias stayed in the shadows, using the environment to his advantage. He triggered small traps, falling nets, sticky adhesives, and mechanical distractions. Each hunter caught off guard was delayed, allowing him time to move the child to a safer section of the building. Elias spoke to the child quietly, his words steady and calm. Humans may seem small, weak, or unimportant to others, but we protect those who cannot protect themselves. We do not give up and we do not abandon the helpless. That is why we survive. The child clutched his arm, trembling. I never knew humans could be like this. Elias smiled faintly. Most don't. They underestimate us. That is always their mistake. Night dragged on. Outside, the hunters became increasingly aggressive. They began breaching less critical buildings, trying to flush out whoever had fooled their sensors. Their frustration turned to violence, their code of conduct breaking down. Elias knew it was only a matter of time before they noticed something was wrong in his house. He prepared for the inevitable confrontation. He did not see it as fear, it was strategy. Humans were not warriors by nature, but they were clever. They could improvise. Every tool, every machine, every scrap of metal in his workshop could become a weapon, a shield, or a distraction. The child watched him, eyes wide. You will fight them. Yes, Elias said simply. Because someone has to, because no one else will. And because hiding is not always enough. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass echoed from the street. A small squad of hunters had split off and entered the adjacent building. They were moving quickly now, aware of resistance. Elias knew they were coming closer. He glanced at the child. Remember, stay quiet no matter what happens. The hunters reached his house. One pressed against the door, testing it, while another checked the windows. Elias held his breath. He activated a small mechanical contraption hidden in the floor. Metal plates shot upward, creating obstacles, while automated lights flashed, creating shadows that confused and startled the intruders. The hunters recoiled, their disciplined approach faltering. They adjusted, but humans were unpredictable. Elias moved silently, navigating the chaos with a precision that seemed impossible for one man. He guided the child deeper into hidden passages, past ventilation ducts and storage spaces, ensuring safety first. Time became meaningless. Minutes stretched like hours. The hunters grew increasingly desperate, breaking more structures in their search. But Elias, relying on patience and cleverness rather than brute force, stayed ahead. He had no weapons, no reinforcements, only his wits and his knowledge of his own home. Finally, the hunters paused. Their sensors, supposedly superior, could not distinguish the illusions from the reality. Frustration turned into retreat. Slowly, they withdrew from the immediate vicinity, regrouping outside the settlement perimeter. They were not defeated, they were calculating. But for now, Elias had won a small victory. He sank to the floor beside the child, letting out a long breath. The child looked at him, eyes full of wonder and fear. You saved me," it whispered. Elias shook his head. "No. We saved each other. Humans are not heroes, we are survivors, and we survive by protecting the helpless even when the odds are against us. Remember that?" Outside, the hum of ships remained. Elias knew this was only the beginning. The hunters would return, stronger and more prepared. But the child was safe for now, and that mattered. For the first time, the child felt a glimmer of hope, something it had not felt since its parents had been taken. As dawn approached, Elias sat with the child in the hidden chamber. The twin moons disappeared, replaced by the pale light of the system's sun. He knew the galaxy underestimated humans, and that was their advantage. Humans could be quiet, patient, and clever. And when pushed, they could do things no one expected. The child leaned against him, exhausted. I think I can stay," it said softly. Elias nodded. "You can stay. Here you are safe, for now. But remember, being safe is not just about hiding. It's about being smart, being brave, and trusting those who protect you. That is what it means to be human." Outside, the settlement remained quiet, but Elias knew it would not be quiet for long. The hunters would return. The galaxy would continue to underestimate humans. And that was fine. Underestimation had always been humanity's secret weapon. The child, once trembling and lost, now felt something it had never imagined. Hope. And in that hope, a spark of trust in the strange, stubborn, clever species called humans. And somewhere in the shadows, Elias whispered almost to himself, "Hide, they're coming, but we will not fail, not while we are human." The sun rose slowly over the frontier settlement, painting the buildings in shades of orange and gold. For a moment it seemed as if nothing had happened during the long night. The small streets were quiet, the dust still settling from the chaos outside. But Elias knew better. The hunters had retreated, but only to regroup. They would return, stronger and more prepared. Humans could not rely on luck. They relied on thinking, planning, and improvisation. He walked carefully through his workshop, the child following closely behind. Its small hands clutched the blanket tightly, and its eyes darted to every shadow. Elias could see the fear still lingering in its gaze, but also something else, a growing curiosity, a spark of understanding that humans were not like the other species the galaxy had known. "We need to move," Elias said, his voice low. "They will not give up easily." "But we have something they do not expect." The child looked up at him. What do humans have?" Elias smiled faintly. "We have patience, we have stubbornness, we have the ability to fight back when no one thinks we can. That is what makes us dangerous, even if the galaxy refuses to believe it." They went to the perimeter of the settlement, where the land dropped sharply into a rocky valley. From there, Elias could see the hunters' ships hovering in the distance, small but unmistakable against the pale blue sky. They were monitoring the area, scanning for movement, calculating their next strike. "They think we are weak," Elias said. "They think we will hide and wait to be taken, but humans do not hide forever. Humans adapt." He led the child to a series of hidden tunnels, pathways he had built over years for emergencies. Most settlers thought them unnecessary, a relic of old fears. But now they were more valuable than ever. Elias moved with the confidence of someone who knew every corner of these tunnels. He opened a small hatch and gestured for the child to enter. Inside, the air was cool and damp. The tunnels twisted and turned, leading to storage rooms, workshops, and hidden exits. The child looked around in awe. You built all this?" Elias nodded. "We prepare for the unexpected. Humans do not wait for trouble to come, we make our own defenses." As they moved deeper into the tunnels, the child began to speak more, its broken words forming a clearer picture of what had happened to its family. They came at night. My parents, they tried to stop them, but..." It paused, trembling. "They are dead." Elias' chest tightened. He had seen death before, but not like this, not the kind of deliberate, cold-blooded destruction that could erase an entire family in moments. "I know," he said quietly, "and that is why we cannot wait. We protect the helpless. That is what humans do, and that is why you are alive." The tunnels led them to a small control room hidden beneath the settlement. Screens, sensors, and consoles filled the space. Elias activated the system, bringing it to life. On the monitors, he could see multiple points of interest: streets, rooftops, and the distant valley where the hunters' ships hovered. Humans had not expected a direct attack, but they had anticipated that someone would come looking for trouble. And now they had the advantage of preparation. The child watched the screens in fascination. "Humans, they are clever," it whispered. "I never knew that you could," Elias interrupted gently. "Cleverness is not enough. We combine it with patience and endurance. We wait for the right moment, and then we act. That is why humans survive when others think we cannot." He pulled up schematics of the settlement, highlighting areas that could be used to mislead the hunters. Automated lights, sound generators, and holographic images would simulate human movement. Heat emitters would create false signatures. Every building, every street corner, every object could be part of the defense. "They will come again," Elias said. "And when they do, they will expect weakness. They will expect fear. But we will show them something they cannot understand. Humans do not fight because we want war. We fight because we refuse to lose what we protect." Hours passed as they worked. The child helped where it could, learning quickly how humans could turn simple tools into complex defenses. It arranged sensors, adjusted cameras, and even helped recalibrate the holographic projections. With each task, the child's fear lessened, replaced by a growing admiration for the humans' skill and determination. When night fell again, the hunters returned. This time they were not cautious. Ships descended rapidly, deploying squads to search the settlement. Elias watched through monitors as they spread out, expecting easy targets. The humans were ready. False heat signatures led hunters to empty buildings. Holographic projections created the illusion of activity where none existed. Automated doors sealed paths and mechanical traps slowed their advance. One by one, hunters encountered these obstacles, frustration and confusion growing with every step. The child watched silently, eyes wide. They cannot understand," it whispered. Elias nodded. "No, they cannot. That is the mistake of all who underestimate humans. We are not strong because of size or weapons. We are strong because we think, adapt, and protect. We do not abandon those who cannot defend themselves." The hunters regrouped outside, realizing something was wrong. They could not locate the humans or the child. Communication between squads became tense, filled with sharp clicks and tones of frustration. Elias knew they were beginning to understand that their calculations had failed. They had underestimated human ingenuity. The child stepped closer to Elias. Why do humans help when it is so dangerous?" Elias looked at the child, eyes steady. "Because someone has to. Because no one else will. Because it is the right thing to do. That is what separates humans from others. We do not wait for rewards or recognition. We act because it matters, because life matters." Outside, the hunters attempted to breach more buildings, hoping to flush out the humans. They triggered traps, fell into nets, and were slowed by adhesives and mechanical obstacles. Their coordination faltered. The humans were not visible, but their presence was felt everywhere. The hunter's confidence began to crack. The child watched, learning quickly. "Humans, they are not weak," it said softly. They are relentless," Elias finished. "Yes, that is exactly what we are." Hours turned into the early morning. The hunters, exhausted and confused, finally retreated to regroup. Elias knew they would return again, stronger and with new strategies. But for now, the settlement had survived another night. The child looked at Elias, eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. I think I understand," it said. "Humans, they do not give up." Elias smiled faintly. "No, we do not give up. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, and sometimes that is enough to change everything." They returned to the hidden control room. The child sat quietly, absorbing everything it had witnessed. Elias knew that this was more than just survival. The child was learning the essence of what it meant to be human: courage, cleverness, patience, and the refusal to abandon the helpless. As dawn broke, the settlement appeared calm, but Elias knew better. The galaxy believed humans were weak, slow, and insignificant. That belief was a mistake. Humans were underestimated because they were unpredictable. They adapted, they endured, and when pushed, they could do things no one expected. The child leaned against Elias, exhausted but more confident than before. I am safe here." "You are safe," Elias said. "For now, but safety is not just hiding. It is thinking, acting, and being ready. That is what makes humans strong. That is why we survive when others fail. And that is why you will survive too." Outside, the hunters were already planning their next move. They would return better prepared and more determined. But Elias had learned something important. Humans did not need to confront enemies head-on to win. They used their minds, their skills, and their willpower to survive and protect. That was the true strength of humanity. The child looked at the settlement, the tunnels, and the clever traps, and for the first time it felt hope. It had lost everything, but it had not lost this. It had not lost the chance to live, to learn, and to understand what humans could do. Elias watched the sky, knowing that the battle was far from over. But he also knew this: humans never gave up. They never abandoned the helpless. They never surrendered to fear. And as long as they lived, there was always a chance. The child whispered softly, almost to itself, "Humans, they are different." "Yes," Elias said, placing a hand on its shoulder. "We are different, and that difference is what keeps us alive." The settlement remained quiet as the first rays of sunlight touched the rooftops. But within its walls, a small story of courage and cleverness had begun, a story that would shape the child's future and the galaxy's understanding of humans. And somewhere in the shadows, Elias whispered to himself, almost as a promise, "They think we are weak. They will learn. One day, the galaxy will understand what it means to underestimate humans." The day after the hunters' retreat, the settlement buzzed quietly with preparation. Humans were not soldiers, but in moments of crisis, they became precise, resourceful, and determined. Children were guided to safe rooms, farmers doubled as engineers, and every piece of machinery was examined for potential use as defense. Elias moved through the streets, calm but alert. while the alien child followed close, absorbing everything. It had survived one night and now witnessed humans prepare for the next. "We can't wait for them to strike again," Elias said, scanning the perimeter. "We have to use what we have and be ready. The galaxy underestimates humans, and that is our advantage." The child nodded, though it did not fully understand. "But they killed my parents. They will not stop." Elias stopped and looked at the small figure, its eyes wide and frightened. "That is true. They will not stop. But humans do not fight only because of fear or revenge. We fight to protect what is ours and what cannot defend itself. That is why we survive when others fail." The first hunters returned before nightfall, their ships cutting through the sky like sharp blades. This time they did not approach cautiously. They deployed drones to scan every building, every corner, every shadow. Elias observed through hidden monitors, analyzing each movement. Humans had no need to confront the enemy directly. Their strength lay in strategy, patience, and clever use of the environment. The alien child watched with fascination. "Humans, you do not run," it whispered. Elias shook his head. "Running does not save lives. Thinking and acting saves lives. We prepare, we adapt, and we protect. That is why humans are dangerous even when we appear weak." As the hunters spread through the settlement, Elias activated a series of traps he had prepared. Nets fell from rooftops, adhesive fields slowed their movements, and small automated drones created false heat and motion signatures. Each hunter squad became confused and frustrated. Their precision and training were wasted against humans' unpredictable and clever methods. The child gasped, eyes following the chaos. How do you know what to do?" Elias smiled faintly. "We observe, we adapt, we do not panic, we think ahead. That is what makes humans strong. We are not the fastest or the biggest, but we are patient, clever, and relentless." Outside, the hunters grew more aggressive, realizing that their targets were elusive. They deployed small ground units to flush out the humans. But Elias had anticipated this. The settlement's tunnels were extensive, connecting buildings, workshops, and storage areas. Civilians moved through these hidden paths, avoiding danger, while humans set ambushes and obstacles above them. The alien child watched as humans acted without hesitation, each movement purposeful. Farmers and engineers became tacticians, guiding squads and civilians through complex routes. Elias led a small team of defenders, using machinery and the environment to slow and confuse the hunters. They are not just humans," the child said softly. They are clever, strong, brave." Elias nodded. "Yes, that is what humans are. We may seem small or unimportant to the galaxy, but we survive because we protect what matters. And sometimes, protecting others is the most dangerous thing we can do." Hours passed as the battle of wits continued. The hunters attempted to breach buildings, expecting resistance. Every time they thought they had located a human or the child, they were met with false signals, mechanical obstacles, or clever decoys. One squad moved into an empty building, only to find a series of nets and adhesive traps that delayed them for crucial minutes. Another group approached the main street, only to trigger automated distractions that sent them retreating in confusion. The child began to understand why humans were feared by some species in the galaxy, despite appearances. You are not weak," it said, voice trembling with awe. You are relentless," Elias said. "Exactly, that is the word. We are relentless, and we protect the helpless, no matter the risk." By midnight, the hunters realized that the humans were not simply hiding. They were prepared. They had turned the settlement into a maze of traps, illusions, and clever defenses. Their technology, meant to overpower simple species, was ineffective against humans' ingenuity. The alien child could see it clearly now. Humans did not fight with brute strength alone. They fought with mind, courage, and unity. Elias paused to check the child, who was crouched behind a small console, eyes wide with both fear and fascination. "Do you see now?" he asked gently. "Humans do not give up. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is why we survive when others fail." The child nodded slowly, absorbing every word. I see. Humans, you are different." "Yes," Elias said, "we are different. And that difference is our strength." The hunters regrouped outside, frustrated by the failed attempts. Their communication was sharp, filled with clicks and tones of irritation. They were trained, disciplined, and deadly, but they could not predict humans. Humans were adaptable. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were patient. The child watched, learning quickly. Your parents, they did not understand what humans could do? Elias shook his head. Perhaps not, but that is why you are here. You will learn, you will understand. And you will see that humans are not weak, even when others try to make them seem so. The night stretched on. Outside, the hunters' attempts grew more desperate. They began breaking structures to force the humans out, trying to flush the defenders into the open. But every action was anticipated, every trap was clever, every escape route prepared. Humans did not panic. Humans did not fear. They acted. They thought. They survived. The child followed Elias through a series of hidden tunnels, moving quietly, avoiding detection. Each step revealed new ways humans could turn ordinary tools into weapons, ordinary spaces into defenses. The child's fear began to fade, replaced by awe. Humans were not just survivors. They were protectors, thinkers, and warriors in their own way. Hours later, the hunters attempted one last coordinated attack. They believed they had located the humans' hiding place and moved in force. Elias had expected this. He activated a series of automated defenses that turned the space into a labyrinth of obstacles. Nets, adhesives, traps, and diversions slowed the hunters, while false heat and motion signatures led them in circles. The child watched, heart pounding, as humans worked together seamlessly. Every movement had a purpose, every action was coordinated. The hunters were skilled, but humans were smarter. They used patience, strategy, and courage to survive. By the early morning, the hunters were forced to retreat again. They had failed, exhausted, and frustrated. The humans had won not by brute strength, but by cleverness, unity, and the refusal to abandon the helpless. The child turned to Elias, eyes wide. Humans, you saved the settlement. Elias shook his head. No, we did not just save the settlement. We showed what humans can do. We protect what matters. That is our strength. That is why the galaxy should never underestimate us. The child's fear had faded, replaced by a growing sense of trust. It had seen humans in action, not just as weak creatures as the galaxy believed, but as clever, relentless protectors. Elias led the child back to the hidden control room. The battle is not over, he said quietly. The hunters will return, but now we know their methods. Now we know what we can do. Humans survive because we plan, we adapt, and we protect. That is why we endure. The child nodded, understanding more than it had at the beginning of the night. I am safe here. You are safe, Elias said. For now. But remember, safety is not hiding. Safety is thinking, acting, and being ready. That is what makes humans strong. That is why we survive. And that is why you will survive too. Outside, the settlement appeared calm. But within, humans had shown their true nature. They were not weak. They were clever, brave, and relentless. And they would not give up, not for themselves, not for those who could not defend themselves, and not for anyone who underestimated them. The child whispered softly, almost to itself, Humans, they are different. Yes, Elias said, placing a reassuring hand on the child's shoulder. We are different, and that difference is what keeps us alive. The settlement remained quiet as dawn broke, but the child now understood something it had never imagined. Humans did not survive by chance. They survived by courage, cleverness, unity, and the refusal to abandon the helpless. And that understanding changed everything. By the time night fell again, the settlement had transformed. It was no longer just a quiet frontier town. It was a fortress of cleverness and preparation. Humans had anticipated the hunters' return, and they had spent the day improving every defense, laying new traps, reinforcing tunnels, and training civilians in quick, safe maneuvers. The alien child watched silently, awed by the humans' calm determination. Every action, every adjustment, every plan was purposeful. Nothing was wasted, nothing left to chance. They will come back, Elias said quietly as he moved through the control room. Screens lit up with sensor data showing movements outside the settlement. And this time they will be stronger, faster, smarter, but that does not matter. Humans survive because we are ready for what others do not expect. The child nodded slowly. I understand now. Humans, you do not only protect yourselves, you protect others too. Yes, Elias replied. And that is why we are dangerous, not because we are large or strong, but because we care, we plan, and we refuse to give up. Outside, the first signs of the hunters' approach appeared. Their ships glimmered in the pale light of the twin moons, moving in calculated formations. Drones scanned the settlement from above, looking for heat signatures, movement, anything to give them an advantage. The hunters had learned from their previous attempts. They were not underestimating humans this time, but Elias had anticipated that. He activated a network of automated decoys, holographic images, and heat generators. Buildings appeared occupied where no humans were present, movement appeared in the streets where no one walked, and sensors fed false data directly to the approaching ships. The hunters slowed, confused by signals that did not match their calculations. The alien child watched, whispering, They cannot understand. Humans, they are relentless, Elias said firmly. Yes, that is the word. Humans are relentless. We do not surrender, we do not abandon those who cannot protect themselves, and we do not panic. That is what makes us strong. The hunters landed squads along the outer edges of the settlement. Their steps were careful, but confidence faltered as traps slowed them at every turn. Nets fell, adhesive stuck to boots, and automated noises drew squads away from their intended paths. Each misstep gave humans time to regroup, adjust, and counteract. Elias led a small team of defenders through the tunnels, moving silently above and below the ground. They were not armed with heavy weapons, but they did not need them. Humans turned simple tools, pipes, levers, weights, and scrap metal into clever mechanisms that slowed and confused the hunters. They struck where necessary, using precision, cleverness, and coordination. The child watched from a hidden vantage point. It had never seen creatures like this. Humans did not fight recklessly, they fought smartly, strategically, and always with purpose. The child began to understand what its parents had failed to convey. Humans were not weak, they were unpredictable and brilliant when protecting others. Hours passed. The hunters grew increasingly frustrated, their initial confidence replaced by anger. They could not locate the humans or the alien child, and every step they took triggered new traps or false signals. One squad entered what appeared to be an occupied building, only to find themselves tangled in nets and surrounded by blinding lights. Another approached the main street, only to be drawn into a loop of false images and motion signals that wasted precious minutes. The child whispered to Elias, How do you do this? How can humans be so clever?" Elias smiled faintly. "We observe, we plan, and we adapt. That is how humans survive. We protect what matters, and sometimes protecting others requires creativity and patience. That is our strength. The galaxy underestimates humans because it assumes we are simple. That is always a mistake." As the night wore on, the hunters realized that they were not facing simple humans. They were facing minds capable of turning every weakness into a weapon. The alien child saw humans acting without hesitation, calmly solving problems, and using their environment to their advantage. It was not strength that won battles here. It was intelligence, courage, and unity. Elias checked on the child, whose eyes were wide with admiration and understanding. "Do you see now?" he asked. "Humans survive because we act when others do not, because we think when others panic, and because we protect those who cannot protect themselves." "That is what it means to be human," the child nodded slowly. I understand. My parents, they tried to protect me, but humans can do more than anyone expected." "Yes," Elias said, "and now you will learn that humans never stop when someone is in danger. That is why we endure. That is why we survive." The hunters regrouped outside, frustrated and exhausted. Their communication became strained, their formations broken. They realized too late that they had underestimated humans. The humans had anticipated every move, countered every tactic, and used every tool at their disposal. The settlement was no longer just a place to hide. It had become a fortress of human ingenuity. The child watched as humans moved through tunnels and hidden passages, coordinating efforts to protect civilians and each other. Farmers, engineers, and medics acted like soldiers, but with creativity and precision. Every person had a role, and every action was part of a larger plan. Elias paused to check the control room monitors. He could see the hunters' confusion and growing desperation. "They will not give up easily," he said. "But humans survive because we adapt, because we are clever, and because we protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is our advantage, that is our secret." The child, understanding more than ever, whispered, "Humans, you are not weak. You are unstoppable." Elias shook his head. "Not unstoppable, but we are persistent, and persistence combined with cleverness and courage is enough to survive anything. Remember that." Hours passed, and the hunters made one last attempt to force their way into the settlement. They believed they had located the humans' positions and moved in force. But Elias had prepared for this. Automated defenses, traps, and false signals created a labyrinth that slowed and confused the enemy. Hunters became disoriented, some retreating in frustration, others trapped temporarily by simple but effective human devices. The alien child watched, realizing that humans did not need to be stronger or faster to succeed. Their minds, their courage, and their unity gave them power beyond what appearances suggested. Humans were clever, relentless, and unyielding when protecting those who could not protect themselves. By early morning, the hunters were forced to retreat again. Exhausted, frustrated, and humiliated, they could not defeat humans with brute force or superior technology. The humans had not fought recklessly, nor had they risked unnecessary lives. They had protected their settlement, defended the innocent, and shown the galaxy what underestimated creatures were capable of. The child turned to Elias, eyes filled with awe. "Humans, you changed everything. You saved the settlement. You saved me." Elias smiled faintly. "No, we did not just save the settlement. We showed what humans can do. We survive not because we are the strongest, but because we protect what matters. That is why the galaxy should never underestimate humans, and that is why you will survive, too." The settlement remained quiet as the first light of dawn touched the rooftops. Humans had shown their strength, not through weapons alone, but through ingenuity, courage, and determination. The alien child now understood that the species it had once thought weak was anything but. Humans were clever, relentless, and fearless when protecting others. Elias led the child back to the hidden control room. "The battle is not over," he said. "The hunters will return, but now we know their methods and we are ready. Humans survive because we think, we act, and we protect. That is our strength." The child nodded, understanding fully for the first time. I am safe here." "You are safe," Elias said firmly. "For now, but remember, safety is not hiding. It is thinking, planning, and acting. That is what makes humans strong. That is why we endure, and that is why you will survive, too." Outside, the settlement appeared calm, but the galaxy had seen something it had never expected. Humans were not weak. Humans were clever, brave, and relentless. And the alien child understood something that the hunters never would. Underestimating humans was a mistake that could never be repeated. The child whispered softly, almost to itself, "Humans, they are unstoppable." "Yes," Elias said, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. "Not unstoppable, but persistent, clever, brave, and that is enough." The sun rose fully over the settlement, casting long shadows across the streets. The humans inside had proven what many had thought impossible. They could survive, protect the helpless, and outwit an enemy far stronger and more experienced. And as the alien child watched, it realized something it would never forget. Humans were not just survivors. They were heroes in their own way, clever, relentless, and unwilling to abandon those in need. The settlement woke to a strange calm. After nights of tension, alarms, and relentless enemy attacks, the first light of dawn brought a quiet that almost felt unnatural. Elias walked through the streets, surveying the aftermath. Buildings had survived, traps had done their work, and the humans had not lost a single life unnecessarily. The alien child followed closely, still pale from fear but no longer trembling. Hope had replaced terror, and for the first time it felt safe. "They will not come again today," Elias said quietly, "but they will return. The galaxy does not forget mistakes, and they will not forget us." The child looked up, eyes wide. "Then, what will humans do? Will you fight them again?" Elias shook his head. "Not fight them for the sake of fighting. Humans fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is why we survived the past nights, and that is why we will endure the future. We act when others will not. That is our strength." Even as he spoke, communications from the galaxy arrived through hidden channels. Word of the settlement's clever defenses, the humans, resourcefulness, and the hunters' repeated failures had begun to spread. Several species paused their own agendas, watching closely as reports detailed a species that had been considered insignificant now outsmarting elite enforcers. The galaxy began to realize, slowly and reluctantly, that humans were far from weak. Inside the control room, Elias activated the communications console. "We need to send a message," he said. "Not for revenge, not for threat, but to show that humans will protect those who cannot protect themselves." The alien child watched as humans prepared the broadcast. It had never seen such purpose, such clarity. Every word, every choice of tone, every detail was designed to convey a simple truth. Humans were clever, relentless, and unwilling to abandon the helpless. The message went out across open channels, reaching distant systems, carrying evidence from the child's data core, proof of the hunters' intentions, evidence of their attacks, and documentation of the atrocities committed against the child's species. The broadcast did not demand allegiance or fear. It simply showed what humans were willing to do to protect those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy listened. Some scoffed, dismissing it as exaggeration. Others were intrigued. Some feared humans not because they had weapons, but because humans had demonstrated intelligence, courage, and the ability to survive under impossible odds. The alien child looked at Elias. They will come? Some will, Elias said calmly, but it no longer matters. Humans are prepared and humans do not give up. We protect, we adapt, and we endure. That is enough. The settlement buzzed quietly with activity. Humans repaired damaged structures, reinforced defenses, and ensured that every civilian was safe. The alien child saw families working together, engineers teaching farmers how to use simple tools for protection, and medics preparing for emergencies. Every person contributed not out of fear, but out of determination. Humans acted because they chose to act. Hours passed and a new threat approached. The hunters had returned, larger in number, more determined, expecting humans to retreat or surrender. They believed that repeated failure would finally break the settlement. But Elias and his team had anticipated this. The humans did not panic. They moved calmly, activating defenses, adjusting strategies, and guiding civilians to safety. The alien child followed closely, now understanding fully what humans were capable of. I never knew humans could do this," it whispered. You are unstoppable." Elias shook his head. "Not unstoppable, but clever, relentless, brave, and that is enough. Strength is not always about weapons. It is about courage, intelligence, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The hunters advanced, confident in their superior numbers and technology. But the humans had turned every street, every building, and every alley into a maze of obstacles. Automated defenses, decoys, and carefully placed traps slowed and confused the attackers. Heat signatures led them into empty buildings. False movements drew squads in circles. Humans struck only when necessary, using precision, coordination, and clever devices to maximize their advantage. The alien child watched, fascinated. It had lost its family, its home, and its sense of safety. Now it saw a new truth. Humans were protectors, thinkers, and relentless fighters when others were at risk. The child realized that the galaxy had misunderstood humans for generations. They were not weak, they were extraordinary in ways few could comprehend. Hours passed, and the hunters were forced to retreat once again. Their pride shattered, their confidence broken. They could not understand how a minor species could outsmart and protect itself so completely. The humans had defended their home and the helpless, not with overwhelming force, but with intelligence, patience, and unity. The alien child turned to Elias. You saved us. You saved the settlement. You saved me." Elias smiled gently. "No, we did not just save the settlement. We showed the galaxy what humans are capable of. We survive because we protect what matters. That is our true strength. And now you will see that humans do not abandon the helpless." Days passed and the settlement rebuilt. Supplies were replenished, tunnels strengthened, and civilians trained to act quickly in emergencies. News of human ingenuity and resilience spread across the galaxy. Some species began sending refugees, knowing that humans could offer protection. Humans did not advertise this, they never had, but word traveled fast. The reputation of humans as clever, courageous, and relentless protectors began to grow. The alien child spent time learning from humans, understanding their methods, their courage, and their unique approach to survival. It saw families helping each other, engineers creating clever defenses, medics caring tirelessly, and children being taught to think and act in dangerous situations. Humanity, in its quiet way, was teaching the child how to survive, how to protect, and how to endure. Elias spoke to the child one evening as they watched the twin moons rise. "Your parents were brave," he said quietly. "They tried to protect you, but humans are not just brave. We are clever, we endure, we adapt, and we protect. That is why you are alive. That is why the settlement survived. That is why humans will always endure, even when others underestimate them." The child leaned against Elias, finally feeling a sense of belonging it had not known since losing its family. I understand now. Humans, you are different. I am safe here. Yes, Elias said. You are safe. Humans do not abandon those who cannot protect themselves. That is our way. And now you will learn it fully, not just with your mind, but with your heart. The galaxy continued to take notice. Some feared the humans, recognizing that underestimation could be fatal. Others admired them quietly, sending messages of cautious respect. But one thing was clear: humans were no longer considered insignificant. They were clever, brave, and relentless protectors. They acted for themselves and for others, and that made them a force to be reckoned with. The alien child looked at the settlement, at the humans working, planning, and protecting each other, and finally understood something profound. It had found a home. Its parents were gone, but their mission, protecting the helpless and standing for what was right, was carried forward by humans. And in that truth, the child felt hope, safety, and belonging. Elias stood beside the child, looking over the quiet streets. The hunters had been defeated for now. The settlement was safe. But more importantly, the galaxy had begun to see a new truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were clever, resourceful, and fearless when defending those who could not defend themselves. The child whispered softly, almost to itself, "Humans, they are heroes." Elias smiled, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. "Not heroes in the way the galaxy thinks. We do not seek glory, we seek to protect. And protecting others, that is enough to change everything." As the twin moons set, and the first light of day bathed the settlement in warmth, the child realized that it was finally safe. It had lost its family, but it had found something just as important: a home among humans, a species that refused to abandon the helpless, and a truth that would guide it for the rest of its life. The galaxy would continue to test humanity, to underestimate them, and to challenge them in ways no one could imagine. But Elias knew one thing: humans would endure, protect, and outthink every threat that came their way. And the child, now safe and learning the ways of humans, would carry that lesson forward. The settlement remained quiet, but it was alive with the strength of its people. Humans were clever, relentless, and courageous. They did not fight for conquest, they fought to protect. And in that simple truth, they were unstoppable. The child looked at Elias, eyes filled with gratitude and awe. "Thank you for everything." Elias nodded. "No thanks needed. Humans do what they must. We protect, we endure, and we survive. That is enough." Outside, the galaxy watched silently, slowly learning what it had never understood before. Humans were not weak. Humans were relentless, clever, and brave, and anyone who hunted the helpless would find them waiting, ready, and unyielding. The alien child, once trembling and lost, now felt a sense of belonging, safety, and hope. It had survived because humans had chosen to protect it, and in that protection it saw the truth of humanity, a species underestimated but unstoppable when defending what mattered most. Elias looked over the settlement one last time, speaking softly to himself. "They think we are weak. They will learn. They always learn." The child smiled faintly, feeling for the first time truly safe. It had lost much, but it had found something priceless: the unyielding, clever, and brave heart of humanity. And that heart would never fail, no matter what the galaxy sent next.